First, I would like to thank Monsieur Thierry and the World Policy Conference for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to take part in this very, very interesting conference. I think this is the fourth occasion that I've been here, and each time it has been a learning experience. Thank you also, Justin, for putting me as a number 2 on the panel before other more distinguished speakers have their say in the matter. I would begin by saying that to win a war, you need to know your enemy. And I think ancient philosophers, strategists like Sun Tzu or Kautilya have said this. But it's true every time that you have to deal with terrorists, as Sergei said just now. Terrorists are creating problems which are multidimensional in nature, and we need to understand that. So much of what I'm going to say today is that fighting terrorism requires an understanding of the way terrorism has morphed over the years, for instance. History is both relevant and important in this context. But do realize and understand that while terrorism is not a postmodern phenomenon, the paradigmatic changes that have taken place in the practice of violence has meant that there are profound strategic implications in the ways terrorism is employed today. Let me try to outline the stages one by one. First, I would ask you to throw your mind back to the 80s of the last century. This was when the broad sweep of radical Islamist extremism today received its first impetus. The war against the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 1980s was a major turning point, reflecting as it did a mixture of religious fervor with fundamentalist aims. The Afghan Jihad attracted volunteers from across the Islamic world and helped initiate what in subsequent years became a crucial mass of collective jihadist effort based on a combination of experiences across Egypt, Syria, the Arab world, and West Asia overall. This marked the beginnings or the opening of global jihad. Next, we come to new era terrorism, which in a sense began with the September 11 terror attacks, September 11, 2001 terror attacks in the United States, and was finished by a series of attacks thereafter, including the one we had in Mumbai in November 2008. Both signified the emergence of a different kind of threat, one of achieving mass casualties and large-scale economic and political disruption rather than drawing attention to a primary cause or primary causes. Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden became the symbols of this new genus of terrorism. Between 2001 and 2011, the Al-Qaeda core and its regional affiliates were responsible for several large-scale terrorist attacks in different regions of the globe. Third, as the Al-Qaeda core started to weaken following the elimination of Osama bin Laden, internal tensions in the Al-Qaeda core emerged, and this led to the emergence of what we now call the Islamic State phenomenon. The theology of the Islamic State was not very different from that of the Al-Qaeda, both being influenced by the nihilistic teachings of the Egyptian Sayyid Qutb and the Palestinian Abdullah Azam. But the ISIS combined this with the practical theology of the Afghan warlord Jalaluddin Haqqani. I would say that the real fundamental difference between ISIS and earlier versions of terrorism is the fact that they paraded an exclusivist brand of puritanical Islam. The idea of a new caliphate, themes such as hijrah and bay'ah, and overall gave a complete new dimension to what they meant by modern Islamic ideas. This has proved to be a very powerful magnet in attracting Muslim youth from across the world. I would urge this audience to understand and recognize the fact that the Islamic State is a unique entity. It is very different from other terrorist organizations. It believes in holding territory. It, in effect, projects an Islamic State prototype. Its recruitment techniques, the employment of dark propaganda in its videos for purposes of recruitment and propaganda, its proselytization methods over the internet, all have created a virtual community of fanatical sympathizers. I do not think that the world has ever seen self-radicalization on this scale. And I think there are no markers to indicate how and where this would end or where this would lead the world to. Violence is a leitmotif of the ISIS, beginning with the highly publicized campaigns of beheading civilian hostages. It has carried out some of the most spectacular killings in the past 2.5 years. Sergei made some reference to this just now. I do not think that I should repeat the horrors of 2015 and 2016, too recent in our memories. What has happened is that the success of the ISIS is, in turn, leading to a resurgence of other terrorist organizations. The Al-Qaeda, for instance, which was in decline, is showing signs of a revival. The ISIS and Al-Qaeda are now establishing contact with a host of other terrorist outfits and formations across Asia and Africa, and perhaps Europe as well. I believe that the Al-Qaeda is even thinking or considering declaring an Islamic emirate to counter the ISIS caliphate. In conclusion, I think we need to acknowledge that terrorism is becoming more asymmetric, even as newer terrorist groups emerge. Both the ostentatious brutality of the ISIS and the relatively softer jihadism of the Al-Qaeda pose not merely law and order threats, but also a kind of civilization tsunami, considering the way we run our affairs. Countering the enduring myth of the ISIS, namely that of a Puritan Islamist entity, is not going to be easy. The threat that the ISIS posits is that it is not just an organization, it is an idea. I think we need to understand this. When the ISIS encounters setbacks, it will morph into ISIS 2.0 and continue to stage more attacks. If the ISIS is defeated in Syria, the conditions that created the ISIS will not just disappear. A generation of disaffected youth willing to wage other future struggles already exists. They will stream out of their present habitat in Asia and Africa to other regions, including Europe and the United States. The lone wolf syndrome will become a very persistent threat and danger. I urge you to realize that the internet will become a crucial weapon in the hands of the ISIS once it morphs into ISIS 2.0. Already, the ISIS has plans to use the deep web and the dark net. The latter would, in ISIS 2.0, become a vicious instrument in the hands of the ISIS to engage in cyber terrorism. Finally, I would say that terrorism will be the defining threat of not merely the present, but future generations as well. Terrorist groups in the future, as seen in the case of the ISIS, are likely to increasingly justify their brutality as evolutionary adaptations to an unimaginably dangerous social environment. Consequently, countering the appeal of pernicious ideas such as those of ISIS will be the greatest challenge facing humanity. How does one fight an idea or wage an effective war against radical philosophies or dangerous philosophies such as those espoused by the ISIS? Not by using drones and not only through violence. The battle will have to be fought with ideas. We need better ideas, more relevant ideas. This is not happening at present. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no 30-year war or a mere generation-long struggle. The conflict will be a long drawn-out one, and we and the world must prepare for a much longer haul. Thank you.